Hello. So my guest today is returning for what we promised when we first spoke. Body language expert in negotiation, vocal tonality, and all manner of things to do with how we come across to other people. Joseph McGuire, thank you for returning.
Oh, it's my pleasure, John. Thanks for the invitation.
Unfortunately, I couldn't find anybody else to come on and be read, I guess is the word, uh,
Yep.
today. So I am your all yours for the next however long it takes. So please, before we go into the reading and everything, if you can just again remind the listeners about yourself, what you do, how you help, etc., and then you can tell me what we're going to do next.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, well, as John said, my name is Joseph McGuire. I am currently living in Dublin, where I originated. I've lived in other places, but I'm back here now. My particular speciality is working with face reading, the ancient Chinese skill of face reading. It's a 3,000-year-old tradition, but I've also worked with and taught for many years body language. In more recent times, I've done a lot of online study with former FBI trainers in the fields of negotiation, body language, interrogation, elicitation. So I combine a lot of skills. In particular, now I help businesses, business leaders, business owners with negotiation, particularly the behavioral side. Because one thing I learned a long time ago was that many people, even when they're highly experienced in business and highly experienced in negotiation, become very stressed about the prospect of it, the process of it, and afterwards they feel absolutely shattered.
Right.
So that's the area I particularly work with. And I work with both their internal processes, but also profiling their counterparts in the negotiation. And in some cases, depending on whether it's appropriate or not, I can be in the room with them to let them know, to advise them on what's actually happening across the table in real time.
Okay, so that sounds amazing.
Yeah,
It's like something you'd see on the movies, isn't it? When you're like, this person's
yeah,
doing this person's trying to do that, their body position and whatever tells me that they're trying to achieve this.
yeah. And there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation around about body language, and this gesture means this, and a movement of the head to the right or the left means that, or the eyes look up or down, and most of it is complete nonsense. So it's about being very, very real. And like one of the first things you have to do is recognize and understand what the person's what we call baseline is. So what does a person normally do? How do they normally behave when there's absolutely nothing at stake?
Okay.
So you need to spend time observing somebody before the action starts.
Right, it's really interesting because when I did my hypnotherapy training, we did a lot about visual cues and where the eyes go for imagination, for
Yeah.
visual, for auditory, and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes that wouldn't be the case
Yeah.
for an individual.
Yeah. You have to observe what the individual is doing.
All right.
There are a lot of generalities which are generally accurate,
All right.
but not always. And when you or if we assume that X always means this, then we're going down the wrong path.
No, no, excellent. Oh, great. Yeah, I mean that's really enlightening actually, because although, like you said, there are some things I've looked for actually that doesn't quite ring as real to me, but it's something that I've used in the past. Probably forgot a lot about since I did my training probably 8 or 9 years ago. But yeah, it's something that I took on board as being the truth, I guess.
Yeah, and it's continuous practice. I mean, you know that anyway, but the idea that we've ever got it is a great illusion. Like I've been heavily influenced by Taoism and Zen over many, many years. And one of the pieces of advice, or the maxims I particularly cherish, is Zen mind, beginner's mind. Always recognize you're always in that fresh place of learning again.
Okay.
Keep your mind open, stay curious. And then it's also a case of, like I mentioned, I specialize in reading the face and the body language, but how we speak is equally important. So I'm paying a lot of attention to how people speak, not simply what they say,
Yeah.
but changes in rhythm, changes in pitch, changes in tone.
Hmm.
They're often so revealing. So I'm combining the observation and the listening.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. We're going to kind of get a little bit of a taster of that today when actually you look at me and tell me what you can pick up from. I mean, do you want me to confirm or deny, or do you want to just sort of see what you pick up on? And
Yeah, it's best. It makes it much more real if I basically speak, and then when we're done, then you can confirm or deny.
cool.
Because it's one of the one of the areas I'm most wary about is the idea that I'm being fed information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to do that by asking a question or making a remark, like using the skill of elicitation, making a remark where you're giving them information which you know is going to draw information out of them.
Right. Yeah.
I prefer to avoid that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I've seen people use that before in trying to. Darren Brown, I love Darren Brown, and I love the way he uses that technique.
Yeah.
Just by looking at people, we can kind of see what name people are thinking of and things like that by asking certain questions. You can watch their lip movements and their facial expressions and stuff, and just help guess. Well, not guess. They're telling him subconsciously
Yeah.
information that they don't realize that they're telling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so I am yours. Let's what would you like to where would you like to start? What would you like me to do?
Just sit as you are, and I'll make a start. I don't start in any particular place. It depends on the individual face.
Mhm.
But so I don't do it like from top to bottom or bottom to top. I just start somewhere and then build around it.
Okay.
So
I'm just going to switch the view on here so that when this goes onto the YouTube channel, um, where it records, people will be able to see me a bit better,
mhm.
and hopefully they'll be able to see the things that you're picking up on as we talk.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start with these lines, these deep vertical lines here, just above the lower end of the forehead between the eyebrows. And the one on your left is actually deeper than the one on your right. So there's a number of things about them. Number one, it tells me that you have a definite perfectionist side to you. You take your responsibilities very seriously. You like to get things right,
Mhm.
and your idea of right may be your level of right may be considerably higher than other people. Like
Okay.
you find it difficult at times to let go of things in the sense that that's not quite good enough.
Mhm.
And afterwards, you can be highly self-critical. So that's one of your challenges, to recognize that, okay, I did the best I could at the time, and next time I will do it even better.
Right.
And rather than saying I did it badly or I could have done better, next time will be even better. The internal language will be very important there.
Okay.
But you've got part of those traits, especially because the line is deeper on your left. It tells me you've got at least some of that pattern from your father. So some of that was modeled by your father.
Mhm.
And at times there could have been quite a bit of impatience with it. So be alert to the influence of impatience on your life and
Yeah.
your default settings, so that you're not, if something triggers you, that you're not responding with sharpness, because it's the default setting, it's the conditioning rather than who you actually are now.
Right. Yeah, okay.
I know you've done a lot of work on yourself over the years. I know you've resolved a lot of stuff, but when we have these deep lines, and I've got a very deep one in the middle here. So when we have a deep line like that, it tells us that there's always that possibility of going back to that place. So we need to be aware of it and recognize that this is now, and we have a choice. We can be who we are now, or we can be who we were and who we were conditioned to be.
Right. Okay.
So, and then on a physiological level, when we have these lines,
Mm.
one of the challenges is we may have a tendency towards hypoglycemia or low blood sugar levels.
Okay.
So we need to make sure we're eating sensibly, but
Mhm.
we're not going too long without food. So if we go too long without food, that can bring up that feeling of just uncomfortable, feeling tight, feeling irritable. And it can make us either indecisive or impulsive in our decision making.
Right.
So, and particularly if somebody's pushing us for a decision and we're in a low blood sugar state, that's when we're likely to be triggered
Right.
and demonstrate our irritability.
Okay.
So just to be alert to that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot in those lines just by
I
themselves.
do get what they call hangry.
Yeah, yeah,
When I'm hungry, I do experience a mood shift in that space.
yeah, yeah. And then when you see those lines on somebody like that, when they're deep like that, it's a very clear sign. So part of it then is to make sure you're not eating too much in the way of simple sugars like, biscuits, chocolates, sweets, that kind of thing, that
Mm.
you're eating complex carbohydrates that will allow a slower release.
Mm. Great. That's good.
So that's the first thing. I'll just move from there to the eyebrows. And your eyebrows are basically fairly straight.
Hmm.
They're relatively thick. So that tells me, yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's a nice curve at the end, but the main body of the eyebrow is quite straight. So that tells me structure is very important to you. So when somebody is explaining something to you or telling you about something, it should be quite logical,
Mm.
and the explanation should make logical sense.
Hmm.
Where if somebody starts talking to you in very abstract terms and, energy this and energy that, they'll lose your attention very, very quickly.
Mm.
You Even if you don't say it, internally you think, oh, stop waffling.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's one of the standard things about like a straight eyebrow.
Right.
You need
Okay.
to keep it logical and rational for them.
Right.
Now, the fact then that the eyebrows are relatively thick tells me that you like to be given all the information, all the relevant information. If you feel, and feel is the relevant word here, if you feel somebody is not telling you is not sharing all the information, if you feel they are holding back,
Hmm.
you'll immediately have doubts
Hmm.
as to, I'm not sure about you. So
Okay.
that's another thing. Then
Yeah.
final bit there on the eyebrow is that they curve towards the end. So when you see the eyebrows curving like that, there's a strong element of being very person centered. So personal relationships are very important to you. Now, obviously, I know you're the relationship guy,
Mm.
but that's reflective of who you are rather than simply being a title.
Okay.
And the so even in your professional life, relationships are important
Mm.
rather than simply being transactional. Relationships are important to you.
Mm.
And going from that to the basic face shape. Your
Mm.
basic face shape in the Chinese system, they recognize 8 particular face shapes. Yours is a combination of 2, and could even say 3. But
Mm.
the rounded shape, first of all, when we see that on somebody, we're automatically inclined to feel. Again, feel is a big word here, because the whole body is a transmitter and receiver. The whole body is an antenna. I think I said that previously.
Mm.
But when we see somebody with rounded facial features like that,
Yeah.
we automatically feel that this person's okay. We,
Okay.
we feel friendly, well disposed towards them. Like if you imagine it like a standard baby face, look at a baby face,
Yeah.
and it just softens something inside us. You know, like Walt Disney used this many years ago, like for Bambi.
Okay.
That
Okay.
soft rounded energy, or that soft rounded appearance, tells people, or implies at least, that we are not a threat, so they can let their guard down.
Mm.
And it's hardwired in us to be on guard. This goes way back
Yeah.
to our ancestry. So that's a big advantage to you. And we notice here your right cheek is noticeably fuller than your left.
Hmm.
So that and the right side of the person's face is their public persona. So when you're in dealing with the public, when you're dealing with the work side, the professional side of your life, again, that creates that feeling of, it's okay. I can relax here.
Okay.
I can get on with this guy.
Right.
So you trigger, without saying anything, you trigger that response in people.
Oh, interesting.
So big advantage, especially in your line of work.
Yeah, definitely. I've been told before people have worked with me just because they kind of thought I had a kind face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then when you, like I'm talking primarily about static facial features, but when you smile there, like you just did,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever this applies to any of us, when we smile and it's the full Duchenne smile where the eyes light up as well.
Yeah.
Again, like the eyes narrow when we smile. That triggers a mirror neuron response in people. It lowers our blood pressure, it relaxes us, but it also triggers a mirror neuron response in them.
Uh,
Again, you're not a threat. It's like internally they can just let go, so
can,
they can relax.
can you just explain what a mirror neuron is?
Mirror neuron is, well, there's some question apparently among neuroscientists as to whether mirror neurons actually exist. Some say they do, some say they don't. But what it means is that in this case, there's a neural response, which when we smile, it triggers at the very least a mirror internal response in another person.
Right. And then neurons are triggered, fired off when we experience that
Yeah.
connection with somebody else in that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So because my right side, you said that's my public persona, so my right side is full of the mullet.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not when we see that, and like pretty much everybody will have one side slightly fuller than the other. Apparently, something like 1 in 10 million people has perfectly symmetrical features. So there's no judgment implied in any of it.
Oh,
It's not to imply that you're neglecting your personal side or anything like that. It's
yeah.
just to say that this is a particular advantage for you in your professional life.
Right. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Going from there, and I'll stay with that now. That right cheek, it's nicely rounded and it's nicely full. So that signifies empathy. You are naturally empathetic, which again is an unconscious message people will pick up on.
Right.
So that's again a big advantage for what you do.
Definitely.
I'll go from there to the nose, and
Mm-hmm.
you can say that any of these features on the face relates to many different areas of our being, but the nose, because your nose is well developed, it's nicely balanced proportionally with the rest of your facial features. So the first thing about it is, and it's also pretty straight.
Mm-hmm.
It tells me that and I don't say nice things for the sake of it.
Right.
Be very clear about that.
I haven't paid Joseph prior to the show.
No, I was married to a German lady for 20 years, so I learned to be direct to the point.
Thank you.
But no, you're with your particular nose shape and size, as I say, in relation to the rest of the face, it tells me you're well able to express yourself. You are not a shrinking violet. So when John has something to say, he can say it. But also then, because you've got a nicely rounded nose tip, it tells me that you have an ability. You don't always choose it, but you have an ability, even when you're being direct, to put your message across in a very friendly manner. And your preference is to get on well with people rather than to have discord.
Yeah.
Like for comparison, my features are much more angular.
Mm-hmm.
So particularly if I'm looking very serious, people might assume I'm angry.
All right.
So just observing that difference between the angular feature and the rounded feature tells you quite a bit.
Yeah.
But because your nose is well defined and it's a rounded nose tip, it tells me that being sociable is very important to you. And again, going back to the idea of being person-centered, very, very important. It's just integral to who you are. I'll move down the face here. I'm looking at your mouth. Your mouth is relatively wide, So it tells me you're naturally very talkative, very chatty. You love to engage in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had silence imposed upon you, it wouldn't go down well. Now, if you chose to go on a silent retreat, that'd be one thing. But if
Yeah.
silence were imposed upon you, that creates an internal stress
Okay.
because speaking is just, again, a natural part of who you are and how you express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether anybody agrees or disagrees with you, speaking is just again integral to being John.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I notice here there's a little sort of dip at the right corner of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells me you don't always like revealing everything. You have a habit, and one could even say a skill at holding things back.
Okay.
So you don't like to have everything on the table until you're sure of what's really going on. And that's not a judgment, that's an observation.
Mm.
It's in today's world, I would say it's entirely reasonable.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. It's interesting. I'll tell you a story. There's a couple of stories actually from what you've said so far, so I'll come back to
Okay.
them.
Okay. I'm just going to move down to your chin. Your chin is well formed, and it's also slightly prominent. So you're a very determined individual. So if you've got your mind set on doing something, you're going to go and do it, and you're not easily deterred. And we can translate determined to stubborn. And
Okay.
there's a fine line between the two. And
Yeah.
at times, particularly if you're in that hangry place, you can get very stubborn, which is not to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So to be alert to that one,
Mm-hmm.
because it can mean you're digging your heels in. And for me, being determined means I see that as something positive, and where there's a constructive, positive focus.
Mm-hmm.
But being stubborn means we just hold to our ground regardless,
Yeah.
and that tends to create unfortunate ripples in relationships. So it's
Yeah.
not basically not beneficial. So
Okay.
just to be alert for that. But going back to the determination bit, once you focus on something, once you have a goal, you're going to be very, very determined to get it. So again, that's you can talk about, coaches will talk about resilience. Resilience has a great quality. So even if things don't work for you in one area, you pick yourself up and you go again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's an innate characteristic. Now I'm just going to go up the face. I'll finish with the eyes, but I'm going to go up to the forehead from
Mm-hmm.
there. And
Okay.
we notice your forehead is nicely curved. It's nicely proportioned, but it's also nicely curved. So that tells me that being your own boss is important to you. Being creative in whatever that means for you is important.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are or were told, we're doing it this way, we've always done it this way, and we're only going to stay doing it this way, that just drives you bananas. Because you need, and I emphasize the word need here, you need to take ideas and explore them, see where you can take them, how you can adapt them, or even if you decide you can't adapt them, you need that space to explore.
Yeah.
And that idea of rules are rules are rules doesn't sit with you.
Okay.
Rules are there to be at least checked and challenged. And the status quo might be okay, but let me check it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And um yeah, I'll just go with the eyes. There's always more. I'm kind of like Lieutenant Columbo. There's always
You'll come back and
in
quiz
fact,
more later.
before I go to the eyes, I actually go to the teeth. You've got a gap there between the two upper front teeth.
I do.
Now, um, there's an old Irish saying that when people have that gap between the two upper front teeth, they're a good singer. I don't know whether I don't know whether you are or not, but
I'd like only in the shower when
okay,
no one's
okay,
listening.
yeah, okay. But one thing about this, when you see that gap, it tells you that this person can, and again, I'll use that word can, be inclined to take financial risks.
Okay.
Okay. So, and it's not, I'm not saying gambling, but taking risks that other people are, what other people might consider risks. And I'll use an example there. Remember when we had the volcanic eruption
Yeah.
back in 2010 in Iceland? The flights were just shut down. There was nobody flying because there was all that uncertainty. Michael O'Leary, the boss of Ryanair, put in an order for like a massive order for more planes. He has that gap.
Okay.
Yeah. So
He took
for
a
many
chance
people,
on
that was a
something.
massive risk, but for him, obviously, it was a calculated risk.
Yeah.
So I'm not suggesting you're going to go and order, a fleet of planes.
Maybe some Lego
Yeah,
instead.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
There's
yeah,
something in that too. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm just going to go with the eyes. Your eyes are naturally quite big. So again, that fits with the work you do, because there's a big element of being heart on sleeve. Your feelings are very important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you meet somebody, it's the feeling of the connection that guides you particularly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when you're with somebody, and this applies in your personal life as well as in your professional life, feeling good together is very important to you. Not just, again, not just transactional. Oh, yeah, we'd spend time together, we'd hang out, but that doesn't do much for you.
No.
But when you feel that connection, and particularly when you can have some fun, very important to you.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a feeling of, yeah, this, possibility here, whatever the possibility might be.
Yeah.
It could be really stimulating conversation. It could be you're going for a great meal. It could be a dance, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But that there's a possibility of, yeah, something new, something fun and exciting from this. That really appeals to you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how's that?
Yeah. So great so far. Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the things you said, the interesting thing when you said about getting things from my father, kind of perfectionism type thing. My dad's 85. And last year he wanted wanted a new kitchen. And rather than pay for it, he wanted to do it himself because no one can do it as good as he can. He didn't want to be sitting there criticizing someone else putting his new kitchen in.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that where that would have come from him. I think there's a lot to do with criticism from him, like living up to expectation and stuff. So I think that perfectionism comes from not good enough, trying to prove yourself type space. So I've done it, like you said, I've done a lot of work on that, but there is still that part of me that likes to get things right, doesn't like to kind of get things wrong. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. Same with the eyebrows. I do like to think things through first. I like to have everything in front of me if possible. A rational thought, rather than going with anything else. What you said about my face shape, yeah, like I said, people have often commented that they've come to work with me because I have a kind face, or that kind of thing comes off. So, like you said, empathy is very powerful as far as the things that I do. And to be able to pick up on other people and connect with them in that way is very important. And like you said, I'm not one of those people that, as you said, with the eyes and stuff, it's I like to feel with somebody, and that's why I have a few very close friendships, because the feeling is right. And I do pick up on people generally, and I'll connect with them or I won't connect with them depending on how I feel, not necessarily what I think about them. Feelings, like you said, are very important. there is a resilience, I think. As you said, I mean, whenever things go wrong, I have a tendency to be able to just pick myself up and move on. Some people call that avoidant personality, but I think it's more I think it's more the fact, you know what, it is what it is, and it's happened now, and how do I kind of take the best out of that situation or move on from that situation in the best way possible? But I think they're right. There is a stubbornness sometimes in that as well, that I don't like being told what to do necessarily. Depending on who it is, what it is, and how they put it across. I think there's a fit, like you said, there's a feeling thing there that somebody understands me, gets me type thing. So there's a, like you said, there's a connection. If there's a connection there and someone's trying to guide me, I'm quite happy to follow what they're guiding me to do. But like you said, I do like a full set of information, facts generally, so I know what it's working, how it's working, why it's working, what it's supposed to do, before I'll be completely comfortable with going there. I have taken some financial risks in the last few years, but actually I've always been a bit spendthrift, I must say, to be honest with you. I'm more of an impulsive and not very thought out financially person. But recently, in the last few years, I've made some financial investments that have been maybe not impulsive, but have been things that I've kind of hoped that would work rather than have things that have had a concrete outcome. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in there. I can't remember. You said about the nose. You said about the tip of the nose. I didn't write the note down for that one.
Yeah, the sociability.
Yeah, again, it's I would call myself like an extroverted introvert. So I love the social side of things. I love connecting with people, but there is, like you said about the silence. The silence is important as well, but it's an imposed silence. It's something I want to choose to do. If, like I said, if I'm thrown into a non-communicative kind of space or an unsocial space or people where I can't connect with people, then I am very uncomfortable in that space. I don't like that space really at all. But I choose, if I choose my own silence, then I'm more than comfortable to be in my own space and not say a word for however long it might take. But yeah, there's definitely a thing there with being uncomfortable around people that I can't connect with. So yeah, that's amazing. Thanks. Did you have anything else kind of you wanted to move on to before I ask you about something that you've spoken about before?
Yeah, let's have it. If you turn your head to the side, let me have a quick look at each ear. Okay. Yeah, good. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay. The ears, even though obviously they're not on the face, or at least for most people that I've come across.
But have they grown a spare one somewhere?
Indeed, yes. Um, the ears are important. In the Chinese system, the ears represent the first 14 years of life, but
Okay.
also they also tell about our grandparents and their relationship. So our right ear tells about our maternal grandparents, our left ear tells about our paternal.
Okay.
So there's a lot of information in the ears as well.
Mm.
So your ears are well formed. So that tells me genetically you've come from strong stock. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
The second thing is, can you just show me your left ear again, John, please? Okay, interesting. Yeah. Okay. So it tells me your left ear, which would be your father's parents, your grandfather would have been stronger than your grandmother, certainly physically. It certainly, the without going too technical about it, the inner rim of the ear here is called the antihelix, and the outer rim is the helix.
Mm-hmm.
The outer rim represents the grandmother, the inner rim represents the grandfather.
Okay.
So in your case, the inner rim, the antihelix, is more prominent, particularly as we go lower down the ear. So it tells me your grandfather was certainly stronger, and I don't mean that in character, but certainly stronger physically. Mm-hmm. But it also tells me in your private life, you pay a lot of attention to an inner voice. So instinct, mm-hmm. intuition, whatever you want to call it, is very, very important to you.
Mm.
That can apply. That can apply when you're working with somebody. You say you're working with a client or a group of clients, and they're telling you something, and you just get a sense, something's off here.
Mm.
When you get that, pay attention, because once you're, shall we say, grounded and calm within yourself, that inner
Mm.
voice is very, very potent.
Great. Yeah. Okay. I'll pay attention to that one. Yeah. I get you're right. There is a definitely a feeling element most of the time to my life, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm just writing a podcast episode on about your gut instinct. So it'll be interesting to see what I can put in there, maybe about myself too.
Okay. There's this little flap of cartilage at the front of the ear is called the tragus.
Mm-hmm.
And just behind the tragus, there's a little notch. I should know the name of it, but I can't remember the name of it. But if you can fit your index finger comfortably in there, it indicates that there's a lot of generosity.
Okay. Yeah, it goes right in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you hear that, everybody, who thinks I'm not generous.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That you mentioned previously about the side of the face with the parents as well.
Yeah.
I'd like to explore that if possible.
So the right side of the individual face talks about the genetic influence and the influence of the relationship with the mother. The left side, genetic influence and relationship with the father, influence of the father.
Mm-hmm.
So in your case, your left side is that bit narrower. So genetically, you're more like your father than your mother. Um, when I look at the eyes particularly, then I notice your right eye is more. I would describe it as more open. I don't mean physically open. Your left eye is a little bit more.
He's actually physically more open as well, my right eye.
Okay.
My left eye, when I sometimes in photographs, my left eye, I can notice that my
Yeah.
left eye is slightly more
Yeah.
closed.
Yeah. But I'm talking particularly about emotionally here. So your left eye is more, shall we say, I'll use the word reticent. So that tells me that I would say it's not so much to do with your relationship with your father, but just in terms of your own personal history, that there's been I just use the word pain. There's been quite a bit of pain,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it is still in process.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, no, yeah, there is there. I can feel it actually, probably as you talk, that there's a closedness to that side. And again, that would be probably like my dad. My dad, when I wanted to improve my relationship with my dad, I had to be much more open with him because he's very closed off and then you have to create a space, like a safe space for him to be able to be emotional.
Yeah.
And so that's the work I did on that relationship a few sort of over the last 10 years or so, was trying to engage him more emotionally. So yeah, there's definitely something there, and like you said, a lot of that stuff will come from that space.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's the thing we model for our kids, whether we realize it or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And what does it say about my sort of the thing with my? Does it got to give you any messages about what my? You said also about the first full 14 years of life with the ears.
Yeah.
Is that something that's kind of shows up in the face as well? Kind of your kind of life experiences and stuff.
Well, the face is a map of the years, years. Just to so you have the first 14 years here, then you have the sort of the early teens, the 20s, 30s, 40s, and so on down.
Okay.
So depending on where lines, indentations, bumps might appear, would indicate something of significance happening at a particular time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd look at, okay, how it has influenced them.
Okay.
It wouldn't tell you necessarily what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I couldn't pick up on stuff like that.
Right.
So the fact that your ears are well formed, that particularly the helix, the outer rim, is well formed on both sides, tells me that, relatively speaking, your the the period up to 14 years was basically, I'll use the word straightforward. If it were traumatic, if there were significant trauma there, what you'd expect to see is an indentation somewhere, or the helix in particular becoming very thin
Right.
at a
Okay.
particular point. But
Yeah. Mine's not at all, really, is it?
no, no.
Yeah.
So it's not to say you didn't have difficulty, because everybody does,
Yeah.
but it wasn't difficulty that really, left you devastated.
Yeah, that's interesting because I do talk about this a bit, that there were instances, and maybe there was one or two episodes, I would say, with my dad probably. I remember my parents separated when I was 9, so that was quite traumatic. And my dad was quite angry and violent at times. And I was probably about 12 when, and again, this is all in my book, so there's nothing that people don't know. When he kind of thought he was going to kill me, when he kind of beat me, and I thought I was going to die. But that was sort of 12 or so. So there's been a couple of traumatic kind of spaces, but when I do think about it, it's lots of little things. Like you said, there were horrible things, but it was more sort of subtle abuse and nothing, subtle neglect and stuff, rather than anything overtly that I could go, okay, apart from maybe when my dad did that, and maybe when my parents separated,
Yeah.
that were traumatic. Yeah. Interesting. So then maybe there's something in my ear somewhere around about 12.
That'll be your right ear somewhere, somewhere around about there. So I'd have to see it very close up on camera for that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. I don't think my camera's as great either, is it? It's maybe a little bit blurry too. So, yeah. Wow. Thank you very much. So, you can tell a huge amount. I mean, it's
Oh
about
yeah.
someone's character, about what their upbringing might have been like. Um, yeah. That's fascinating stuff. Um, and when you're working with people, like you say, how do you put this? You're able to then kind of look at someone and say, okay, what's the best way to work with this person, to deal with this person, like you said, to negotiate with this person based on what you can see from that. And you also, how would you then look at the way they come across? So you work with tonality and things like that with people as well, don't you?
Yeah, you can often get videos of people speaking. Um, if it's somebody who's in a significant position in business, you'll often find a little, even if it's a short video clip of them, which will be revealing in itself. What I will also talk about is, I will have photos of both parties, and I will put both of them on the screen for my client.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at their own photo as well as their counterpart. And then I will talk about, okay, this is your default communication style. This is theirs. If you want to be successful, you're going to have to adapt
Mm-hmm.
this way.
Right.
These are your stress triggers. These are theirs. This
That,
is,
that, that's fascinating. That'd be a great thing to know about everybody,
yeah,
wouldn't it? I mean,
yeah,
people definitely need to work with you and find out more about this stuff, because imagine if you could be across from someone and know, not only understand your own stress triggers, which you're able to help
yeah,
people to see, but if you could look at someone else and go, okay, I know, I can kind of gauge that if this happens or that happens, this person's going to go into stress, and we're probably going to have a very unproductive space.
yeah,
Uh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
Something
absolutely.
just come back to me actually about my mouth. You did say there's that little tiny
Yeah,
drop. One of my friends, probably about 10 years ago, I've known for probably 30 odd years now. They did actually say to me one day, they said, "You're very open and talk about stuff and share and stuff." She said, "But I always feel like there's something about you I don't know."
yeah,
And it's very interesting you say that there is part of me that it probably does get, again, from my experiences of upbringing generally and other experiences I've had in other relationships, there is probably part of me that still feels protective of myself.
yeah, yeah,
And isn't completely vulnerable when I could be, and allows parts of me to be seen which I'm worried about exposing.
Yeah, that's always a choice for any of us anyway.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm not saying that you need to be completely exposed all the time, but again, I think there is probably a deliberate subconscious block in there that sort of says, okay, that's enough now. You just need to take a step back.
Yeah.
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 Wow. Fascinating. Thank you for your time. If people want to get in touch, if you please do remind them how they can do that.
LinkedIn is the best place to get me. I am there on Facebook, but LinkedIn is the best place to get me. And it's Joseph McGuire, McGuire.
Lovely. Thank you, Joseph. This will be on the John Kenny Coaching YouTube channel as well as the Relationship Guy podcast. So if you'd like to have a look to see what Joseph was looking at, please do go to the YouTube channel and you can have a look and at me and see what he was talking about. Thanks for your time. Absolute pleasure talking to you. Take care.
Yeah, Sean. Take care. Thank you.